This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so welcome to the Clean Call. I'm Anna Gold. I'm the co-chair of the Clean Network, and I'm also the lead PI on the Clean project that's funded through NOAA. And I've been with Clean since 2010, so for a long time, since its beginning. And I just wanted to give an overview about what Clean is and talk a little bit about the Clean portal this today. But before I do that, let's see if there's any announcements.
There's so many great things going on. Should we find one, or it's hard to know where to start on? There's so many great things going on. So.
Why don't you share a couple of your favorite? Or I think
okay. Well, there is the one that I did send something out to the list today. The city of Berkeley has announced its commitment to climate action after the GCAS summit. And as Berkeley often does, it's going above the state of California to kind of pull everybody else ahead. So they're aiming at 10 years ahead of the state of California to go to 100% renewable electricity and to be net zero by 2050. So that's extremely ambitious. And the part that I thought was most significant is we basically come from Berkeley. Berkeley is our starting point. And Berkeley has always been a city that is very receptive to education. It understands you can't reach these goals without education at the K-12 level, at the university level, at the professional level. And so it's very receptive, and we're glad to bring others who want to work with Berkeley as a place that's going to be very receptive and very leading edge and going forward, which can help have a model where we have more basic work to do in other parts of the city, in the country. We'd be glad to introduce. I've already got something from Green Ninja, which is wonderful, of working together in that city in particular.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jim.
Well, thank you.
Anyone else has some updates? And if you missed the presentation last week, Frank gave a summary about the summit last week. It's recorded, or you can just take a look at the slides. That was a nice overview. Okay. I am getting some feedback here. I don't know if that's, unless you are speaking, would you mind muting yourself so we don't get feedback? Trying to see. Oh, yeah, great. It's gone now. All right. Well, if there's no other announcements, I wanted to start with sharing my slides here. Let me see. Oops. How do I share my slides? I think you might have to make me a presenter, Katie. Would you mind doing that?
Oh, sure. Let me do that right now. Sorry about that. Should be all set.
No problem. So you should be able to see my screen here, and I'm gonna make it presentation.
It has just come up for me.
Okay. Can you see those slides? Okay. Here. It doesn't go into presentation mode. Why is that? Well, oh, is this better?
We can see your notes.
What's that?
We can see like your version, not the one where you see the next slide. There you go.
Why don't we do this? Okay. Well, so this is a presentation that we give at our regular Clean webinar series. That's why it's at the top here. It says webinar series, something I just presented last Thursday, but it really gives an overview of what Clean is. And there's always this confusion about what is Clean, what's the Clean network, how do we all work together, and it's and there are different parts, and they have kind of different histories, and that's why it's good for us to sometimes talk about it with the network. So CLEAN, as you all know, stands for Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, but then we call it CLEAN Network, so there's 2 networks in there, and we know that's not correct, but it just sounds better than doing CLE network or something like that. So we accepted that was somewhat inaccurate. And it's been around since 2010. And here, Tamara, I know you are on the call. Tamara was the lead PI and one of the visionaries for making CLEAN happen. But it was it came out of engagement in the around the climate literacy principles and documents. So there's these the set of big ideas in climate education that was developed in 2008, 2009, and that drew the community together to say, what do we need to know to be climate literate? That was then endorsed by a lot of agencies, and out of this, Tamara and Mark and Frank and Susan, they were really the spearheads in envisioning the CLEAN project at that time. They wrote a proposal to NSF and said, we really need to support educators in teaching about these big ideas. And it always had 3 prongs, this project. And it had the CLEAN network, which was the community that pulled these big ideas together in these in the documents. But then as soon as NSF funding came in, then there was funding to provide the very tangible educator support. And so to this day, there's some disconnect between these, the collection and these teaching about pages and the network, and sometimes network members don't really know much about the portal, and that's why I want to give this overview here. And maybe everyone knows about it, but there's been some people in the past confused. So you can see here, we started initially with NSF funding, and have transitioned a number of years ago now into NOAA funding, and NOAA has been since then providing the support to keep CLEAN going. There's been small funding by the Department of Energy to have the partner of the climate literacy document, the energy literacy principles that also were developed with input from the CLEAN network, the big ideas in energy education. And with the funding from the Department of Energy, we really bolstered up the energy component of CLEAN. Initially, we started with really addressing the big ideas in climate and just a little bit of energy topics, and that we aligned these 2 documents more. One big partner in all of this is the Science Education Resource Center at Carleton College. They are providing the infrastructure in the background. So when you go to cleaner.org, that's on a server of the CIRC group. And they have been really influential and important in developing the infrastructure that allows us to hold our review process, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, how we vet resources. Series is where Katie and I are located. Katie is on the call here too. She's the current program manager for CLEAN, and then Turk is here because that's the institution that Tamara was affiliated there for decades before she left and is doing a lot of awesome work independently now as a consultant. I don't know, Tamara, if that's a good representation, but there was a lot of initial thought and resource provided to Turk. All right. And really, Tamara or Katie, you should all chime in if I'm forgetting anything. I know that Tamara is providing some input here in the chat. She's consulting for CLEAN and doing other work too. All right, so let me give you now, this was a lot of history and a lot of background. Oops. Why does it not? Oh, now it does allow me to advance my slide. So here's a screenshot of if you go to cleaner.org, that's a screenshot I did just earlier this week. So that's what the page looks like right now. And I said earlier, we have these 3 different components of CLEAN. We have the collection, we have guidance that we provide for teachers, and we have the network. And you can see this here in the blue, the green, and the orange bar on our portal entry point. And I'm going to first talk about the collection, give you a little bit of an overview here, and then talk about the teaching guidance and the network you're much more familiar with, but that's going to be the structure of what I will talk about. We have some news over here on the side. We just released, Katie, when was that, like a week or two ago, or maybe 3, the new climate literacy quiz. We've had for years an energy literacy quiz, which is the top hit in our web analytics. It's always at the top. A lot of people use it. So at some point we decided we also needed a climate literacy quiz since it's so popular. So that was just released. And Clean was also featured in the New York Times just a couple on Friday, I believe, and there was a big NBC article. So we try to keep some of these things that are happening recently on Clean here on the front page. Okay, so, and there's a short video clip. If you go on the front page, you can see an overview of the perspective of a classroom teacher. How does this all play out in the classroom? Oops. So what is, sorry, this is, doesn't really allow me to navigate other than my mouse, and that's not very elegant. But here, my next slide, talking about the collection. So the blue bar at the top, that's where you enter the Clean collection, and that's what a lot of educators know us for. And that's why when we look at our web analytics, that's why the majority of people come to Clean. It's to find resources that they could use in the classroom. And so here are just a few of our design principles. So we really view this as a community effort. So we are recruiting, we are asking people to submit resources to Clean that are then reviewed in our team. But then we always bring in the community to help in the review process through our panels, and I'll talk about the process in just a second. We, as a guiding principles, we always look for classroom readiness. So one of the, we have a lot of review criteria, but if we boil them down, we are always looking for resources that educators are excited to find and are ready to use in the classroom. So if somebody on Sunday night decides, oh, I just really need a lesson to teach about the carbon cycle, they should be able to go to Clean and find what they need. We send everything that is in the collection out to an expert scientist in the field. So while we do an internal review as well as we can, we are not experts on everything. So we send resources out to people that know more than we do, so that the science is really accurate and you can count on this. Clean is a pointer collection, so we don't have any leverage over the resource. So sometimes there are issues with a resource where a scientist says, well, there's this one part that's not really described really well. We put that in our annotations unless the scientist said this should really not be used in the classroom because it just is not good enough to be used by a teacher. But if there's minor concerns, we describe that on our catalog page. The collection is curated, so our team, and Katie is one of them, and we have a whole series of undergraduate students that help us do the tedious task of keeping 700 resources up to date. And Tamara is just teaching a course and she's looking through Clean and she keeps sending us little prompts and say, this link is broken and here's a link broken. So we have a lot of ways we check the collection, but in the world of online education, there's always going to be broken links. So we do our best, we curate it as well as we can, but if you find a broken link, let us know and we'll fix it. But that's the curation part where we make sure it's okay. Everything is online, everything is free. They are not our resources, but we don't point to anything that's not free. We do in our team and with help from external consultants, alignment with the next generation science standards, and we align with these documents and the big ideas of the literacy framework. And then the CERC infrastructure allows to filter the resources. So we have a lot of filter options for searching the collection. Okay. Oh, Tamara said she's the one. I was just looking in the chat if there's a comment. Okay, so why would an educator want to come to Clean if there's Google out there? And you can Google, and with less than a second, you can get over almost 1 million results. So why would you want clean? And we hope this helps to showcase this, that who has time to look at 1 million resources and understand whether or not they are scientifically correct or not. Clean, on the other hand, if you do a search, you can do an open textbook search, which is actually not the best way to search the collection because it does search on the word hurricane. So if there's hurricane is used in a different resource, it will still pull it up. So it's not it's the way that a crawling system is searching. But even if you do that, you get only 25 matches, and those are scientifically correct and vetted. So if you do clean searches, you get a lot fewer resources and just have to look through 25. If you use the filters better, where you go into extreme events and say, if I want to teach about hurricane, what are the best resources, where we check boxes and said, this is a hurricane resource, you only actually pull up 5 or 6. So then all of a sudden you really don't have many resources you have to look at. But that's the difference. That's what the design idea was when Tamara and others have developed clean. And feel free to either interrupt or put something here in the chat box. Here's a busy diagram of our clean review process with many different steps. And I'm not going to talk you through everything here, just help you understand that it's a really rigorous process. So we have any one of you can submit resources for us to consider. But then we have these 3 different review, a triage, and 2 rounds of review in our team, and we try to have an educator and a scientist do these reviews, so we have these different perspectives. But those people are not experts in or they may be experts, but they may not be expert in whatever the resource is about, but they can look for good best practices design criteria, and that's how we have a long form of different questions they have to fill out. But then we have a panel review where we bring in the community, and that's where anyone can, if you are interested, send us an email, and we include you in our next panel as a panelist to help us vet resources. And there's 4 people in each panel looking at every resource that makes it through these first rounds of review to really say, should that be in clean? Should that be one of the resources out there for educators? And then once the panel gives their thumbs up, we do one more round of sending it to an expert scientist for review and do cataloging, alignment with standards, annotations where we capture all the review comments and tips that were captured. So that's the process we go internally, and that's what we are funded to do from NOAA, among other things. But that's why NOAA provides funding, because they are interested in pulling the resources onto their site. And so that's the process we go through. Here is the result of the process. So if you go to the collection and then you search for a resource, you get this, we call it a catalog page, but I know that's internal jargon, but that's kind of the summary page for each of the resources. Again, we don't own the resource. The URL is here. You can see this is a resource that's developed by NAGT, National Association for Geoscience Teachers, housed at Carleton College. It could be developed by, it could be a NASA, NOAA resource or whatever it may be, but we summarize everything that happened in the review process in clean and hope this is added benefit. So we have the title, we have the URL, we have the developer here, we have a little summary of what the resource is about, a thumbnail for recognition, and we've done standard alignments. We bring in educators that do a lot of standard alignments to look at every resource, think it through, and say if a teacher wanted to teach these performance expectations about these disciplinary core ideas, would this resource be aligned well? So that's where the summary is here. We have in these blue boxes, we capture all the notes from reviewers, teaching tips, and about the science comes also from these external scientists, and we have pedagogy and technical detail comments. That's all featured here. You can just skip this all if you're not interested and just go straight to the activities by clicking on this blue button here, but there's also all this information that's added benefit. So different ways to filter and search the collection is someone could use, if you click on this blue, on the frontcleaner.org, on this blue box at the top, you get to our entry page into the collection. And really what's the added benefit that we have in addition to featuring the resource are these filters. And these are all, they search against anything that a human did. I said earlier that open text box search is a crawler, so it looks for, if you put carbon cycle in, if carbon cycle shows up in a resource about hurricane, you might be confused why it pulls it up. If you go through any of our filters here, it's one of our team members thought it would be relevant. So you can search by resource type, by grade level, and that's also discussed by the panel if a resource is appropriate for a certain grade level. There are the performance expectations that could be searched. We can search by regional focus. So if you say, oh, I'm in, I don't know, Oregon, and I really want to look for a resource that's relevant here, you can look for that. Dataset use is maybe slightly cryptic, but it's we tag any resource where students use actual scientific data. So if you're driven by practices, want to have strengthen quantitative teaching, that's a checkbox where you can click and then say, now I want to look for hurricane resource where I really want my students to work with hurricane data. We may not have a resource with that, but that's a way you can filter the collection. Climate.gov. So why is this here? I said earlier, I think in a sentence, that one of the reasons NOAA is funding CLEAN is because CLEAN is providing the resources they are featuring on climate.gov teaching climate. So you can see that tab here. This is an older screenshot from the page, but it hasn't, the spirit hasn't changed. So they, climate.gov syndicates CLEAN. So anything that's on CLEAN is on climate.gov. If you go to climate.gov, you essentially searching the CLEAN collection in a different Chrome. But so their content is our content, and that's why there's a synergy between the two. And getting different audiences, but they trust the process and use that as their resource pool. Okay, so that was a quick summary overview of the CLEAN collection. The teaching guidance pages, clicking on this green button here would be the entry to that those pages. Let's see. Okay, there we are. So if you click on that green button, you come to this front page here. And I said earlier, the history of CLEAN is that we have these two big idea documents. We call it principles, and those have supporting concepts, but that's, again, kind of jargony if you don't know those documents. But it really summarizes what anyone should know or should be teaching about when you wanted to teach about climate or energy. Or if you have to teach about it, but you don't know much about it, that's a place where you can go and kind of read up on it. So, if I, virtually here clicked on the teaching climate button, this would be a place where you would go. We have the big ideas are kind of chunked in eight different big ideas. They are numbered 1 through 7. We're starting with the sun provides the energy, really thinking about the energy system and how energy drives climate, and then about different concepts, all the way to climate has consequences. That's where under this principle 7, the big idea 7 are the impacts of climate and mitigation, and are the impacts of climate. The guiding principle, which is called GP here, and it's again kind of jargony for anyone who doesn't know the document, it's humans can take action. So that's really where the mitigation aspect comes in, and how humans are connected to climate change in different ways. And so if anyone wanted to read up on any of these topics, there's a summary of the critical ideas that describe this big idea. There's a section that describes how how this is hard to teach in the classroom, or what would be good in routes to understand. Some misconceptions are described, and then some resources and examples of how this big idea could be introduced, and some supporting resources. And here's a screenshot of this document. Same for energy. Again, it's this document. You can see here a screenshot at the bottom. There are the 7 big ideas, and you can see here at the bottom the quiz that is so popular. Those are nested on these teaching guidance pages. So that's where a teacher could go and just get a little bit of an overview of how to teach it, and then find some key resources that we link to. All right, moving on here to the clean network. The third pillar of the clean program or clean community is really us here on the call. The clean network, I said this earlier, is let's see if I can get to my slide. I'm sure I'll get there some point. Okay, here we go. So if you click on the Clean Network, you come to this front page here, and there are, we have about 630, 640 members now. As you all know, the ways to engage with the Clean Network is becoming a member of the email listserv, and that's where our telecons are advertised. So we have this weekly telecon, but then we also have social events like meeting. For example, this Climate Action Summit, there was a lot of conversation about it, and a lot of Clean Network members met there, and there was some in-person meetings often around any big meeting. Should be a professional meeting like the AGU, American Geophysical Union meeting, or around some of these critical climate meetings like the COP. Their COP representatives might meet up, for example. So here's the Clean Network page. The most critical is certainly the telecon page here, which summarizes the past telecons. And so you can see here that it started in 2010, and you can go through if you know. I've gone back and know Susan Hassel gave a presentation last year, and I wanted to look up something, wanted to look at her slides. Everything is here. It's a recording, the slides are there, a bio of the presenter. So this is a screenshot here of our current page. You can always find the slide deck. So if you just call in, you can pull up the slides yourself, or later go back to the recording. So that's kind of text heavy, but it has a lot of good content here. Okay, so that's the Clean Network as a quick summary here. There's a leadership board. We have 15 leaders of the community that have been part of the clean community, climate literacy community, are guiding the work of the Clean Network. And then there's our 2 amazing fellows. Katie is one of them, and Patrick is another one. They are supported by our partner, the ESEP Federation, the Earth Systems Information Partners, that are providing the infrastructure for these calls, and they are also providing support for of our fellows, and they are supporting the Clean Network and organizing these meetings and starting them and things like that. Other ways to connect with Clean, we have in our team here are doing a lot of marketing, getting clean content out there. One of the ways we do this is through our very regular, almost weekly STEM Flash. That is a synthesis of what's in the collection, and we try to use teachable moments. So we would, in wildfire season, hurricane season, we develop we pull the best resources to teach about these topics and connect with how the topic is playing out in the media. The last one we released, I think earlier this week, was around this new NSTA climate statement, and pulled some resources that would support using that in the classroom. And so you can sign up for the STEM Flash on the front page of the Clean portal, and then you'll get this in your inbox. It's fairly short, and it's just a few sentences and just highlights of the different of the different resources. We also put it on social media, and we do a lot of featuring of different resources on social media. So how can you become involved? You're already involved, you're already part of the network, but you can clearly use our clean resources. You can sign up for the STEM Flash. Please submit resources for clean. We have now, we're on annual cycle. In the spring, we'll have our next review panel. So now is a good time to send us resources that you think are outstanding and that should be featured on clean. So send it to either Katie or myself. And I'm just looking in the chat. Did I get the ESIP acronym wrong? Thanks, Tamara, for its Earth Science Information Partners. Thank you for correcting that. And then we have a few more webinars coming up. These were the slides and more content, but these were the slides for the overview of clean. We have coming up here, and I know it's pretty small, Tuesday to the 25th, so later today, we have teaching a webinar held by Karen Kirk, who's talking about these teaching about pages in more depth. We have coming up in the next couple of weeks, talking about how NGSS, searching clean through NGSS lens, and how to create resources using the clean network, the clean resources. So these are the ways to become involved. You can also watch the little video or the little trailer here, 1.5 minutes, but I think I gave you probably more information, more historic information about clean than you would get in the other ones. Anyway, that's a summary of what clean is about, and maybe sheds a little bit of light on all these different pillars that we have and how they all interact with each other. Tamara, is there anything, Katie, is there anything that I should mention, haven't said?
That was great. Very helpful.
Tamara says that I should mention the selected by logo. Yeah, earlier in the presentation, maybe if I'm just scrolling fast to it, maybe I'll get to that. You may remember that there was the selected by clean logo here. It's a little bit of a pain. Anyway, so we are connecting to the resource developers to say the selected by clean logo is if something was selected by clean, it's kind of this award. Here's an accomplishment for your resource. Please post it on your website. And we do get a lot of traffic from the web pages that link back to through the selected by logo. So having the stamp of approval, your resource made it into clean is great. And having so we have in our team, we reach out to each individual developer and ask them to put these little stamps on their website, which is good for us and hopefully good for them. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, this is Katie. I was just wondering if you have any specific types of resources you're looking for for future submissions. Like, are there holes that you're trying to fill?
That's a good pointer. We do actually have. Initially, we did when we were building clean. We just went out and said anything that's like within these big ideas we're looking for. But as clean grew, we felt like we didn't need one more activity on the carbon cycle or pollen analysis or something. We were a little bit more thoughtful about how we were looking for resources. And so what we did is we did gap analysis and thin spot analysis. So we went through everything we had in the collection by each of these big ideas and said which big idea is not covered well. So then we went out and looked for those. And then we did the same with the next generation science standards. And then we did the same with big topics. We identified, how can we break down these principles into big topics? And so what we still are looking for, a resource we are still looking for is the impact, climate impacts, very good. Anything around extreme weather, we do have a lot of sea level, a lot of wildfire, but these are still, that's still a thin spot. How to build resiliency and how to mitigate climate, anything and teaching solutions is something we like to look into. Anything that's really aligned with the NGSS is always in scope for us. And then we've been in this last round adding more resources around how do you vet a resource for scientific accuracy, and really thinking about misconceptions, and if there's resources that support that approach is also very helpful.
That's really interesting. Thanks.
Anna, Jim here. Maybe at least to touch on this, and this is the subject I would suggest at some point where we said a future clean call or whatever. So I mean, if this goes too far afield, I recognize that and go there. Is a question that was also coming up at GCAS is the question of clean. Taking a look at what is clean. So it is these things now, and which is fantastic. Is and where does clean is a bridge to, say, another network, or where is clean saying, look, that's kind of just a far field, it's understood, that's outside of our field altogether. I mean, for instance, it came up, what is the clean network's relation to workforce development programs, which tend to be outside of the K-12 system. Then there is, another example is, of course, informal education, so that all may be part of the network, but be recognized that's not part of the resources, like what goes on in the science museums, what goes on at science festivals, what goes on at all these other ways. And part of where it kind of comes in is there is the way in which a K-12 teacher is the conduit of information to students. Right, that is the person who does the presentation. But even in K-12 schools or with K-12 schools, a lot of the education in climate isn't actually the teacher themselves teaching it. They may go on a field trip, or someone might come into the school, or various techniques are going on, and kind of recognizing, not saying it should be different, but that the clean network that's not what the clean resources tend to do. So how is its relation to bridge to other forms of education? Is that a fair, at least to touch on that question, to bring up some time?
Yeah, and I can't see who's on the call now. Oh no, I can't hear actually. So anyone should jump in here who wants to join us. You're right, Jim. It's not something that really can be done very well through these two pillars, the resources and the teacher support. We do have, some workforce resources, but there's not much out there in Clean. So really the connection is made through Clean Network and Clean Network partners, and having this be, Tamara has written a paper in 2014 about Clean being the backbone organization, and thinking about collective impact models of how do we pull everyone together. So I think it's the network, it's the leadership board, it's the listserv that gets the information out and connects there. See what Tamara writes here. Tamara says, I think that the connection to workforce and other forms of education can be made through its members and the organizations and activities that they represent. So similar to what I said. But of course, the issue with the network is that people do it because it's in scope for their work, but it's often not funded. So it's, for us running the collection, it's a very easy and, well-defined task. These other connections, it's such a big connection, big ideas that are relevant and pulling together huge fields. It's not very easy. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try it or we shouldn't do it.
And thank you. I mean, it's even just to recognize what we have and what we don't have, or never take on more than we can actually actually do. There is, I mean, there certainly is the thing of connecting up with other networks, and I think it's also identifying other networks for them to know that Clean is doing this, but they're not doing what you're doing. How can we work together, right? How can we complement each other? Um, uh, I mean, an example that's been around for a while, of course, is Aztec with the science centers, the informal education, where about around the same time Clean came in place, there was a lot of emphasis to do climate education, and that has a history now to it. Um, so that was kind of being a hub, but it's not. Clean is continued and grown, whereas Tech, I don't know, it's not really much of a hub on climate per se. It is being talked at the conference on this weekend, but it's not a major subject as before. With us, there's a whole network of science festivals that are international. That's a way in which increasingly, in many parts of the world, and certainly in the California, where do students and teachers go for good science? They go to the science festival, right? It's families know it too. Is there's a thing of there are people who are seeking great science, hands-on science on different subjects, including climate change. Are we there to receive them? Are we there to have something that's great? So that's one. And then it kind of circles back into the K-12 schools, because the K-12 schools often will go to the local science museum or another place for resources. They will go, like there's a California Academy of Sciences here, where a lot of the Bay Area teachers go to Cal Academy, which overlaps with Clean, right? They're not fighting each other and things, but they will go there for resources and see different things. And one of the things where it comes up with us as a concern, and this also touches on another question of making sure, or how do we protect Clean's reputation, where somebody might claim to be clean and it's not really something that Clean really supports, right? There's a lot of stuff on the YouTube that actually is like that. It's saying this is Clean approved and it's not. But I mean, one of the things that's come up before, and Clean has done well of addressing this one within Clean itself, is the primary demonstration about hands-on science on global warming and climate change is dreadfully scientifically inaccurate, and is actually a promotion of faking your science. It tells teachers to make the lab result we tell you to make, even though that's not what you're getting. And it's been very hard to kind of keep tracking that down and going over one-on-one with people over what's wrong with that. And one of the things they come up with, well, we went to NASA and they have it. We went to Clean and they have it. Of course, they're going to YouTube. They're not actually going to Clean. And so I guess what I'm saying is these networks are all kind of interpenetrating with each other, even if they're not aware of it. And it gets kind of complicated. Now, I brought up a bad example. There's plenty of good examples where we're back supporting. But in any case, the one I know the most, of course, is informal education. And there's that thing of just being aware of addressing how they interpenetrate, even if we're not doing it. How do we want to do anything to update that? Is that fair?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That's always tricky, and in the online world, nothing ever goes away. And I appreciate, we've had these conversations years ago, and we've addressed them. But like you said, the YouTube clip doesn't go away.
Yeah. And it's the big. If you go looking for, hey, what do I do hands-on about the greenhouse effect? You get this clip, and you look at the end of it. It says Clean.
Yeah, I know. And we've tried to talk to the person, but we can't. You can't take YouTube clips down for someone else.
Right. In any case, I'm just getting some of our big science centers. They've got it too, and they're kind of infected by it as well. And then they don't know where to turn for something as an alternative, because so many of them were bitten and said, well, I guess there really isn't anything good, so let's just not do anything hands-on at all. Oh, yeah. Goodness. It's a fantastic subject. It's exciting. It's fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Tamara, for being on. Sorry that there was background, and thanks for chiming in here in the chat. Tamara just said she has to leave. Are there any other points, anything else that anyone wanted to discuss? Okay, well then, why don't we finish the call just a few minutes early here, and we'll be back here Tuesday next week, and we'll hear from Katie or Patrick about the topic for next week. Thanks for taking the time today, and talk to you all soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Anna.
Anna.
Bye.